Hi, and welcome to episode number 65 of Dreamers and Doers, where I interview people who follow their passion and use it to make the world better. I think that's you, Danny. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here, man. Excited to do this.
So I'm excited to have you because I've been I met you a few months ago, and I remember being quite impressed then in how you automated your systems, how you build a life of freedom around having an online business that's pretty automated. So that's what we're going to discuss today. And you've also been to, I've seen you at one of the masterminds organized, and you deliver tremendous value, and you'll be part of the book I'm putting together too. So excited about this conversation. And as usual, I like to start with my guest story. So if you can give a bit of background to people into how you got into creating your online business and living here in Bali.
Yeah, so my story is a little bit different than a lot of people. I did have no marketing background, nothing to do with business. I was a carpenter, actually, for 6 years. So I was working in Vancouver in the pouring rain, and I absolutely hated that job. Like, it allowed me to go do a bunch of traveling in my off time and have the money to afford that, but once I got back from the trips, it was just like I was just miserable at my work. And then I started learning about online business. I learned about it through Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, the classic book that just unlocked something in my brain that showed me what's available, right?
I read it when I was 20, and that completely changed my mind.
Totally, yeah. And like I had never thought that something like that was possible. I always assumed that business was just you giving up your lifestyle, basically. It's like I have to sacrifice my life and be some business, idiot. And then I slowly started listening to more podcasts, learning more and more about online business, but I never really had the impetus to take the leap and actually do it. I never had the confidence to do that, but it was a near-death experience that I had when I was racing longboards in the Philippines back in 2016, I believe it was. And I almost hit a motorcycle head-on and missed it by literally 2 inches. I have this all on video, too, from someone behind me with a GoPro,
Wow.
but I'm going down the hill at about 60, 70 kilometers an hour. Motorcycle's coming up at about 60 kilometers an hour, and had to swerve right in front of me off the road to avoid all of us coming down the road. So that just, it scared me a lot. So I've had a lot of close calls, and I've actually collided with 3 other moving cars before, but not until that point did I really take a step back and analyze where I'm going with my life and be like, wow, I almost just died right there and didn't even get the chance to start this next chapter of my life, to start that online business that I wanted to start. And it was just a lightning bolt of clarity right there that I just had to start now, and whatever excuses I had at the point just didn't really make sense anymore after that.
Do you yeah, that's a common practice for people. I do it sometimes, like thinking that you're gonna die, to kind of speed up a little bit the process and make sure that you do the most out of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no better way to do that than actually almost dying. That will really force you
Yeah.
into that headspace.
Yeah, near-death experience is something I find a lot in being a trigger for people going for what they really want in life and kind of awakening in that way. Yeah. So then you have that near-death experience. You're like, okay, I haven't given a shot yet of building my life of freedom and my online business. So how do you get started?
Yeah, so at that point, I had been weighing 3 or 4 different business models online. And out of those, I just chose Amazon FBA. I don't know how I came to that decision, but
Yeah.
I just chose it and I decided to go for it. So
What do you
literally,
mean by FBA?
Amazon FBA stands for Fulfillment by Amazon. So that's just
Okay.
the business model of getting manufacturers in China to manufacture products for you and then selling them on the Amazon platform.
Okay.
And I dove headfirst into that, and I think about 6 months later, after a lot of hard work, I still had my full-time job working as a carpenter, but I would be working, late nights. I'm getting home, just doing a few hours, 3-4 hours, and 6 months later, I went and launched my first 2 products. And within about 6 months, I had that business built up to about $30,000 per month, and it was going really great. But then I got my Amazon account suspended. And that, at the time, I was being way too aggressive with growth too. So I just invested in a bunch of new products and C shipments from our current products and all that stuff. So at that point, my account got suspended. My cash flow was just totally screwed.
Yeah.
And it was really scary because it was a 90-day period where Amazon held onto a big payment too, and I couldn't pay suppliers, and the whole thing just kind of exploded on me. But luckily at that time, I had already started what is now my agency. So I was just freelancing, creating Amazon listings for my friends who were Amazon sellers, and that was a decent side income. And so I had to make a decision right then. Was I going to start that and turn it into a full-time business, or was I going to go back to carpentry and be a carpenter again? And actually, I did actually get another carpentry job, but I think the universe interjected there because I got fired on my second day at that carpentry job over something that was ridiculous. Like, it was like the boss's cousin was like one of the laborers, and he was accusing me of like being an asshole to him over something that like I wasn't even an asshole to him at all. And the boss came on there and freaked out and fired me. So I'm like, well, this is probably a sign that I just need to go into this business thing and just make it happen.
Okay. And the fact that you thought it was a sign meant that you were already kind of in tune with the signs of the universe, which is like, were you like spiritual in a way, or when you say it was a sign?
Much less back then than I am now. Back then I had a daily meditation practice already, but that was about it.
Okay.
Now being in Bali for 9 months now, I'm much more down that path. Start wearing crazy necklaces and doing weird breathwork things and stuff like that.
Yeah, as we did a Tony Robbins priming at the beginning of this podcast to activate. And we'll talk a little bit about routines, because I know you're really into this for high performance. But before, I want to talk a little bit more about, so in this story you build that agency for Amazon sellers, right? And now you also want to, you're also helping people do the same, and you can do all this because you are pretty intentional and smart with automating your business, so making sure you don't feel overwhelmed and you can work on the next thing without feeling too overwhelmed. Can you explain a little bit how you set that up?
Yeah, so I think it's super important to focus on systems and repeatable processes, or else you will just be like, the analogy I always like to use is an octopus with 8 arms. Like, even if you have, let's say you have 7 team members, and you're an octopus, you have 8 arms, and these 7 team members are doing the work, but if all of those decisions are always coming back to you and you're just managing and delegating everything, you're just literally an octopus with 8 arms and everything has to come through you. So the way to get around that is building systems and repeatable processes. So an example of that in the business is something that we do regularly. We have a podcast that goes out once per week, and my role in that system is to actually do the podcast recording and then upload the file into a Google Drive folder. And then once the file is uploaded to that folder, it will automatically, through a service called Zapier, which is like software automation, it will send a notification to the podcast editor. It'll send a notification to the general virtual assistant, who's responsible for reaching out to graphic designer to make a thumbnail, and they will assign it to a copywriter to write up the description. Basically everything happens just like clockwork after the point where I upload it to there. And so if I was doing the entire podcast editing and upload and all that process, that would take a significant amount of my time. But now that I've set this system up, it's literally a matter of recording the episode and then uploading the file, and everything else happens. So looking at that across the entire business, like anything that is done on a recurring basis, how can I create a system around it where we can do it repeatably and reliably the same, so that we don't have to do so much manual input, and it doesn't take as much time going forward.
And so you do that with both like the tools, automated softwares and tools, and a team of assistants. Can you talk a bit about what was the process to get a team of virtual assistants, and how you could keep it efficient too? And I'm asking because I had a virtual assistant at some point, and I felt like it was taking more of my time than it was saving. And obviously, I take responsibility, so that's on me. But it's not that. My point is, people sometimes think, and I've been a manager in startups, like people sometimes think, oh, just outsource, and it's like you get someone to do this and they do it. But outsourcing requires certain skills and quite a bit of upfront time, right? So how do you work well with virtual assistants?
Yeah, so I think it's important to mention that when you are delegating something, there's kind of three parts to it. There is like automation, so software and stuff like that, and then there's process, and then there is the labor who is going to be operating that process. And a lot of things are going to need all three of these pieces. So for example, you have a general virtual assistant and you come up with a task for them and you assign it to them. Well, that's not the only work, right? You have to make the work to create the task, and then you got to communicate it to them, and once they come back to you with a completed version, then you have to review it and then take some kind of action based on that. And so that's actually a decent amount of work, and that stacks up if you're assigning a lot of tasks, right? But the way to minimize that is think more in terms of roles and repeatable tasks. So instead of having a general virtual assistant that you just, every time you think of something, you assign a task and create it for them, what are the recurring things in your business that need to be done every day, every week, every month that they can repeatably do, and you can train them how to do it once or a few times, and they can just do that going forward without you having to assign anything. They just know that once a week I have to go through this process and I have to do it. And then they can send you like some little report or something that you set up so that you can just verify that they did it and they did it correctly. So that's a lot less work. I mean, it's more work on the front end to set something like that up, but going forward, that takes you out of that state where you're constantly just trying to come up with stuff and then approving stuff, and it can be very taxing, especially once you get multiple team members.
Okay, and so how many people do you have now?
6 full-time, and then we work with various contractors.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're also working on doing a course, right, to help people replicate that. So I guess for you, this is a way to automate also the process of explaining how you automate, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, an online course is perfect on that too, because it's basically just a scalable version of one-on-one coaching, right? Like one-on-one coaching is, by its very nature, not very scalable at all. But if you can get the same information across to, hundreds of people potentially, or thousands of people at the same time, and then, that you need some personal element in there too, but you can do that through something like a weekly Q&A call where everyone is on there and everyone can ask questions and benefit from everyone else's questions. Yeah. You can get the same results for your students, or sometimes even better when you have that community effect, without limiting yourself to only working with a small amount of clients, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think because I asked you when you presented at the mastermind, also it's an interesting one to look at when you feel like automating, because I feel, for me, for example, with my online courses, I started automating almost too much. And then when there was something I needed to change or adjust, it was a little bit harder. So you want to automate, I guess, when you're pretty sure about the process and that it's going to be long term, right?
Yeah, and so my rule of thumb is that whenever I create a new process and I'm not sure that it's going to be like the final process that works, it needs some testing and tweaking, right? So like in theory, you come up with the process, and in theory that's how it's going to work, but once it's been operated 5, 10, 15 times, there's probably going to need to be some adjustments. Or maybe that's something in your business you don't know if you're going to continue to do long term. And so it doesn't make sense to spend hours and hours and hours coming up with the most perfect standard operating procedure document with training videos and all that stuff. So I always start with super basic document in bullet point form. So I keep all of my standard operating procedures in a tool called Notion, which is like basically an Evernote kind of thing where it has all the documents and stuff in there. And I create the title, and then I create literally just bullet points of like step 1, step 2, step 3, and I don't go into much more detail than that. And keeping it like that makes it very fluid, so that if something needs to be changed in the future, then I didn't write out some huge 3 pages worth of stuff. I can just delete one of those line items and then replace it. And then as we go along, the person who's responsible for executing that, whether that's me or a team member, they are now going to be the person who fleshes it out and builds it out. So like once it's been operated 5, 10, 15 times, then maybe you have some nuances that you can add into the standard operating procedure that make it easier. And it's an iterative process instead of front loading all the work and then hoping that that's actually going to be how it happens.
Yeah, it's a fine balance, I guess, between like creating that process and keeping a bit of flexibility, especially in the beginning.
Totally.
And I find also when you talk about these things, you're very clear about whose role, like about the roles, like you're in charge of this, in charge of that. I feel that's really important also as you delegate, right?
No, absolutely. So yeah, like just thinking roles versus tasks is such a powerful thing. So let's say in the most extreme case, you had 5 team members and no one had any real roles. And so there's, let's say 100 tasks that need to be done for the day across the entire team. It now is a huge job for someone, probably you as a business owner, to go through all those tasks and delegate them out to the right person and, follow up with them to make sure that it's actually happening. But if you know that, okay, the general virtual assistant is responsible for all podcast editing, management, they're responsible for social media posting, they're responsible for these things, then it's very clear you know exactly which team member is going to be doing what, and you can reasonably trust that they are going to be handling those things without you always being the one who assigns them the task. Like every single new social media post, you don't have to manually go create another new task. You can have it set up so maybe you upload the photo to a folder, and that person is responsible for then now going through the entire posting and whatever process is behind that.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good. And another technical one for what you call virtual assistants, which are like assistants that are in a different country, often in the Philippines, or like, how did you find them?
There's a lot of good websites out there. Virtual Staff Finder is a good one. Okay. Onlinejobs.ph also. I've had good results on Upwork. So one thing about Upwork is people see their hourly rates and they think that it's too high, but most of the time you can hire someone off of Upwork for about half of their stated hourly rate on Upwork. If you can keep them busy with a full-time job, most of them will accept around 50% of their Upwork hourly rate for a full-time position if you're paying them off, because Upwork charges like 20% or something like that for people who are making money off of it. So I mean, they have to inflate their prices on there. And if they are working freelance gigs, they are probably working less than 40 hours a week, and so they need to have a higher hourly rate to make enough money, right? So Upwork is a great way to test people on small projects. You just pay them their Upwork rate for a few projects, and if you work well together and they are high performers and they communicate well with you and everything, then you can offer them a full-time position.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good process. Do you want to share a little bit also about maybe other tools you think some conscious entrepreneurs listening who want to automate a bit better their business could work with? I mean, for me, I'm like because I don't have like a big team like you, even like with smaller processes, I find that they help really well. I'm very structured with my calendar, for example. Like, I like to keep it simple, and I use Trello for the more high-level tasks. Are there other tools you'd recommend?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Notion. I mentioned this earlier. It's where we house our standard operating procedures and then also a lot of templates. So, for example, there's one of the most important processes in the entire business is the operations manager weekly planning process. So every Friday, the operations manager goes into Notion and they create a new template. And this template has a checklist of all the most important things that they have to go through and check every single week, and to make sure that the business is running correctly. And within that document, there's not only the checklist of the things to go through, but also all the training for each one of those items too, so that if they ever have any clarifications or they forget how to do it, or the operations manager leaves and we have to find a new one, then all of that information is right there, and they don't, there should be no confusion whatsoever. That entire process is taken care of and done.
So Notion,
yeah, really good tool. And for the agency side, this is only going to be applicable for agencies that, probably doing at least $10,000 a month maybe, or else it's not really worth it, is SPP. So that stands for Service Provider Pro. It is kind of expensive, but it keeps everything all together in one place. So the invoicing has a cart system or invoice system to get money from the clients, and then once the invoice is paid, automatically we'll create orders in there, and within the orders you can communicate with the clients directly in the order comments, so everything is contextual, and It has like an affiliate system in there as well. But keeping all of that in one place, especially the contextual messages between you and the client within that one dashboard, that has removed so much problems when it comes to communication, like having your CRM, like your client emails in one place, and then the order project management in another place.
Duct taping with Zapier, the tools together.
Oh, exactly. Like I've gone through so many iterations of different software tools and stacks and integration with Zapier and everything, and at the end of the day, it is absolutely worth it to find a tool, even if it's a little more expensive, that will collapse it all together and just have it all in one place.
Okay, thanks, and that's for the more technical side of it, but the reason we do these automations is also to build a life we love, of course, right? And to build more freedom. You told me last time that you were planning to take some decent amount of time off, maybe in February. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my goal is February 25th. I'm going to take an entire month off from my business. So I'm not going to answer a single email. I'm not allowed to touch anything. So in order for that to happen, I need to put some really solid systems and procedures in place and make sure the team members are all trained to operate them well to the point where I can step away and my business is not going to explode.
This is very Tim Ferriss of you, by the way. There's a TED Talk where he talks about this.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what Tim Ferriss did in his 4-Hour Workweek book, right? And so my goal of that is not necessarily because I just want to like chill out and take a month off. It's more that I am motivated to do what it takes to create a business that is a possibility. Because if I can take a month off and the business doesn't explode, that means that I built a pretty good business that is also going to be sellable, right? Because it's very hard to sell a business that is too dependent on the founder, because no one wants to buy a business where, you know, they have to jump in and they now have to be the superhero superhero person to make the whole business tie together, right? People want to buy businesses they can buy and it's easy to get set up in there, or even better, they don't really have to do anything. They just buy it and it'll make money for them, right? And that is a goal of mine. I want to be able to sell my agency within the next couple of years. So, yeah.
And to focus on what?
To focus more on the coaching side of things. So that's helping other freelancers or people who are in jobs that they really hate right now. How can they build an agency that's similar to what I've been able to create, and just have the location and independence and the financial freedom and whatever to do what they actually love.
Yeah, and come to Bali.
Yes.
And so you want to help people do the same as what you're building for yourself, which is a life of freedom in the end. Why?
Because for me, I spent a lot of my life not within freedom. And to me, that is one of the most suffocating feelings. And that has been the cause of a lot of pain and depression and anxiety in my life, is just like being in a place where I'm tied into a job that I hate, or, you know, financially it's like I want to go do this thing, but I don't have enough money, and all of these things. And that to me is the ultimate goal is to have more freedom, right? And I've built most of my life around trying to create more freedom. And you know, my podcast called Actualize Freedom. My students, I call them Freedom Actualizers. I've just built my entire personal brand, and kind of every goal in my life, it has been wrapped around that. So helping other people achieve that is very fulfilling to me.
Yeah. No, definitely. I also think like when people are free and they're less in survival, you know, they also make better choices for other people, the planet, animals, and all these things. So it's such an important one. Actually, the three kind of pillars of the people who are in my book is well-being, purpose, and freedom, for sure. And I think that they work very well together. You're also quite into well-being, right? And you have very strong morning routines, and you're really into designing an environment where you thrive, right? And I feel it's both professionally for your productivity that you do these routines, but of course also for being the person you want to be. Do you want to talk about the importance of your routines and let's say the extra work activities in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually just had it was my weekly Q&A call with my students this morning, and one of them was talking about how she really struggles with like getting in the right headspace to get the work done, and finding the motivation to actually make it happen. And really, it came down to her with getting rid of the self-doubts and actually just doing the work. She knows what she needs to do, but it's very hard when you just have all the self-doubt. And so I talked about kind of one of the first iterations on my morning routine back when I was in a place where I had so much self-doubt, and things were not going well in my business, and it is very hard to get going. And so during that period, I just had to really hone in, like, what are the key things and in which order are going to get me in that headspace and make it more likely that I'm then going to take the next action. So, like, for me, that was first thing when I wake up, just hop in the shower, because if I just immediately go into the shower and I put my clothes on and stuff, then I'm much less likely to go lay back in bed and go on Instagram or like go back to sleep or something like that. And then the next most important one for me was coffee. So, like, I've been a daily coffee drinker for a long time, and if I get the coffee in my system, then I'm much more likely to have the energy to go into the day and do the next most important thing. And then after that was meditation. So if I start my meditation without some coffee in my system, then I'm much more likely to skip the meditation altogether, or just like not have a very focused meditation because I'm feeling really tired. And then so just really figuring out for me what were the key things and in which order for me makes it more likely that I'm then going to take the next positive action.
Yeah. So you deconstruct one by one. It's about like you climb that mountain and one step at a time, right? It's like you're gonna do. Yeah, I see. That's very smart.
Totally.
Coffee, you take Bulletproof, you told me?
Yeah, Bulletproof coffee in the morning. So yeah, it's just coffee mixed with butter and MCT oil.
And why?
For me, I've been doing that for 3 years instead of breakfast. So it is a replacement for breakfast, and it mimics intermittent fasting. So it's not like a full intermittent fast, because you are getting quite a bit of calories through fat, but it is pure saturated fat. So it's still going to keep your body in a mild ketosis, not full ketosis, but it still mimics a fasted state. And for me, that keeps my energy going. I don't have my first meal until usually 1 p.m.
Okay.
And then the whole morning, my energy is really consistent and good. Before, when I was on different diets, I would usually have a really big energy slump after lunch. And on this diet, I don't have that at all.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the point is, I think it's quite bad to start with just coffee without the fat. I think it's because it diffuses really fast, but it spikes and then goes down, right? While here it's like more smooth. Is that the reason?
That's how it works mostly. Is caffeine is fat soluble, which means that when you should blend it up. Blending it instead of just mixing it makes it more effective.
Yeah.
And makes the fat not separate. But if you have them together, then the caffeine's effects are going to spread out and last longer. Okay. So it's not like a big up and then drop. So you get rid of that caffeine crash. And then it gets rid of a lot of the jittery effects. So even now, if I have coffee without fat in it, I'll notice that it gets me a little more like anxious, and my brain will be a little bit more sporadic. But with the fat, you get that amplifying effects of coffee, like more energy, without the jitteriness and the crash and everything.
Yeah, definitely. Because that's why I personally I did a bit Bulletproof coffee. I don't like the idea of needing a stimulant, so I stopped. But it's true that I was doing way better, at least when I was taking coffee on the Bulletproof side, and I do intermittent fasting too, and I find that I'm really productive. Same, I start eating at 1 p.m. So yeah, that's a really interesting one. And there's another thing I find that kind of replaced my coffee is workout in the morning. I know you work. You take like ice bath sometimes. You work out in the morning. Do you find that affects a lot your level of energy?
So I actually work out midday.
Okay.
I do it right before lunch. So usually I go at 12 to Nirvana Strength. It's like the gym here. It's gymnastic strength base. And I like to mix up my workouts, so I don't really have a plan. I just go off of whatever is not feeling sore and I haven't done in a while. Usually do some handstands in there. But then the great thing about Nirvana is they have a sauna and an ice bath. So I spend 10 minutes in the sauna doing some mental exercises in there. So this is a really good part of my daily routine that is important for keeping my discipline and my mental sharpness in effect. So when I'm in the sauna, I do some mental exercises. The first one I do is I think like A, B, C, and I'm like mentally thinking this, but then I'm thinking saying this coming from right here, like at the top part of my brain. And like mentally, you'll find that you can have thoughts coming from different parts of your body. So I'll do it first up there at varying speeds, and then I'll do it from the throat down here. So I'll say A, B, C, but mentally it's kind of coming from the throat.
Okay.
And what that is doing is it's training your brain's ability to really hone in and control where your focus is, and like really articulate and like notice the transition between A, B, C, and just like articulating that. And it builds up a lot of mental strength and resiliency and focus. And then I'll play around with different words other than A, B, and C, and then I'll do another one where I put my fingers up here at the top of my temples, and then I will keep my awareness here while moving the fingers down here, and then I'll follow a second later with my awareness down to this point, and then back up again. I keep my awareness set here, and then move it up to here, and then follow my awareness back up. And that again is training the same thing, just like flexing the muscles of the brain basically. I find that very beneficial. And being in the sauna is very uncomfortable. Like the first 5 minutes is not so bad, but the second 5 minutes, my brain is telling me to get the heck out of the sauna because it feels like I'm going to die, right? And
same
so
with the ice bath.
And exact same with the ice bath. So it's the same benefit with both of those is mental training basically of like, how can I do something every single day that I really don't want to do and it's super uncomfortable, but I do it anyways. And when I'm in front of the computer, for example, then if I'm like pushing through and I need to get something done like that last half an hour and I really don't feel like doing it, then it becomes way easier to just do it. You know?
Yeah, that's a good one. And do you have other practices you want to share?
Other than that, I do kegels every second day too. I think that's good for sexual health, sexual performance.
Yeah,
that's
so
good.
what's I'm French, so what's a kegel?
A kegel is flexing the muscles on the pelvic floor. Men and women both do this, but good for sexual health and sexual performance, which is part of having an enjoyable life, right?
Well, I think it's even more than that, because like a lot of people have talked about how your creativity for your business is going to come a lot from your sexual energy. I think it's Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich. He talks quite a bit about how the most powerful energy is your sexual energy, and if you can channel that into creativity, it can be really powerful. And I feel like I don't know if you do it, but sometimes when I do that, I picture the energy going up my spine. Is that something?
Yeah, I played around with techniques like that too. Up the spine and then release down the front. Can be very powerful. I'm getting more and more into like the meditative sexual kind of techniques, which is fascinating, but I got a lot more to dive into when it comes to that. Yeah,
that's interesting. Like it's even when you think about like the tantric way, to do masturbation is completely, or even sex is completely the opposite of like what we usually do. Like when you're a teenager, you go in the bathroom 2 minutes and you hide, and while here it's like almost a meditation where you take 2 hours, and a lot of it is about. So I had Mo Salim, I'll get him on the podcast soon, but who's really into biohacking and into the 7 steps he had for having high levels of energy without stimulants. A big one was like to not ejaculate, basically, to channel that energy up your spine and to sublimate it into creativity. And I feel that's something that's getting a bit out there, and that can be quite powerful, at least for men.
Oh yeah, and I agree with that too. I won't be super strict with it, but I'd say like maybe only 50% of the times that I have sex, I'm actually going to ejaculate. And it can still be pleasurable too. It's actually possible for men to have an orgasm and not ejaculate through that technique that you're mentioning right there. It's channeling up the back of the spine and then releasing down the front while squeezing the pelvic floor, the kegels, exercise. So do those kegels. It's good.
Are we getting sidetracked here? I think that's important, though. It's part of the productivity of your business, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And but yeah, I love how you put how you have like your whole life, right? designed around creating that freedom from the business to your habits. How about communities? Are you intentional about how you build your communities?
Yeah, so I mean, that's the main reason why I came to Bali, is to be around the communities that I want to be around. So for me, those two communities are the acro yoga community and the entrepreneurial community. And Bali is a really good hotbed for both of them. I would expand acro yoga just to be like movement in general too, because there's like lots of good ecstatic dance, contact improv dance, and all these great communities of movers out there. Or like my gym, Nirvana Strength, is full of people who can do like one-handed handstands, or like really amazing at calisthenics and muscle ups and all this stuff. And just being around those kind of people it's inspiring, and people that take their health seriously and get joy out of movement and everything like that. That's just really important for me to surround myself with people like that to live a healthy lifestyle. And then the other one being the entrepreneurship community. And being an entrepreneur can be quite isolating. And back when I was in Vancouver, I had a very small amount of friends who were entrepreneurs or who did their own thing. And then so relating to them was much more difficult, right? Like I couldn't talk to them about a bunch of the stuff I was going through, successes or failures or whatever, because they just didn't have that experience. So like I'd bring it up and they would ask some random question about it, and they couldn't ask any more questions because they don't understand. And in Bali, there's entrepreneurs of all sorts. And there's different business events going on every weekend, multiple times throughout the week, and just surrounding yourself with those people really normalizes the very not normal thing of being an entrepreneur.
100%. I mean, I guess that's what we're here and what we're connected to. And what's the impact you want to have in the world? I think we touched a bit on it with the freedom, helping people, like free people.
Totally. Yeah, just really creating more freedom. So, I mean, freedom in my own life, but also freedom for other people. My students and my friends, and people around me. Like, how can I foster more freedom for everyone in my life? It really comes down to that.
And do you see yourself doing it through the coaching that you're doing, helping people set up an agency, or like is there a big plan in of how it would unfold in 10 years or 15 years?
I mean, with the coaching right now is the main plan. I don't like to plan things too much further out than 5 years in advance, because in my experience in my life, I changed so much within 5 years. Like 5 years ago, my entire goal was to be a professional downhill skateboarder and travel the world in a van and just get paid to do that every day. And I actually achieved that at the most base level, and immediately discovered that it was something I did not want to continue doing.
Okay.
So, and like my life today is just so different than that, that for me to choose something like that right now, I don't feel like really serves me that well. I know I have my guiding star of where I want to go right now, and that's going to guide me to a certain place. And once I reach that, there's probably going to be a different direction change, right? So I try to remain open to the flow of life and where that really brings me.
Yeah, that's an interesting balance. I mean, for me, I'm a bit like this. Like I like to visualize. Like I'll have an idea of like 5-10 years, but I know that the flow of life is going to course correct that, and that I'm the same. Like if I had decided where I wanted to be 3 or 4 years from now, it would probably be quite different. But I still feel like I want to have that direction and have that idea and allow it to be flexible in a way, which I feel is what you do with the guiding star.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm a big fan of the book The Surrender Experiment by, I think it's Michael Singer. And it's just such an incredible case study of a man who decided that he was going to surrender to whatever life put in front of him when he was like at college age, and then by the time he was 50 or 60, he had sold a software company for $2 billion, I think it was. And he did not architect or plan any of it. He just, through a series of ridiculous coincidences and whatever, and him just saying yes to all these different changes in his life, like he didn't even purposely start the software company. It just kind of landed in his lap, and now all of a sudden he has a software company. And then it's just really interesting insight into where we might just be getting in our own way, just forcing the vision that we have for our own life to happen when, hey, that big curveball you got thrown, maybe it wasn't actually maybe it was actually a blessing in disguise, and if you would have followed that, you would be going in an even better direction than whatever vision you were trying to force to happen.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because at the same time, like, do you use visualizations, for example?
I do, yeah.
Because that's quite like you imagine the future and you make it like the present, kind of. Like,
Yeah.
So that's quite very intentional in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
So how do you combine like letting the flow of life take you to these different places while at the same time being very intentional?
I think a lot of it has to do with listening to your gut as well. Like like visualization is one thing, but getting thrown a curveball and like some action happening in your life, like some person coming into your life with some opportunity or some other kind of thing, like that's an actual physical event that's happening. And for you to decide to go down that path, or if you are forced to go down that path by like something quote unquote bad that happens, then I think it's worth visiting, like looking at, okay, where does this path actually lead? Instead of being like, no, put the blinders on, I have my vision of where I'm going, and anything that takes me away from that is bad.
Yeah.
Not being so quick to judge that as bad, and actually looking at it as a potential other path.
Yeah. Yeah. But still without being close to change, still having that direction, right?
Yeah, I mean, visualization I think is very powerful, and I certainly use it. But after I read this book a couple years ago, I've become much more open to other random curveballs that have entered into my life.
Okay. And thanks for another recommendation you gave me. I'm reading at the moment. I love it. It's Reality Transurfing.
Oh yeah,
by that
it's a great
Russian book. Is it a Russian?
Yeah, Vadim Zayland or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really good one. Very interesting. So you said quote unquote bad. I guess I figured why you say quote unquote, but can you explain?
Well, it's often a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
So if something happens, like maybe your business partner or something screwed you over, and they did something that totally screwed you over. Well, what if them screwing you over actually opened up another opportunity for you that is going to be even better than whatever that partnership was, right? And you wouldn't have actually gotten that opportunity if you still were with that business partner who, if this was the case, he probably wasn't a good business partner anyways. So those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. It's, you initially will probably perceive it as something bad, but in the grand scheme of things, maybe it's actually not bad at all.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that's very empowering to think like this. Like, if you think about it, how many people who are with let's say, you have your beautiful wife now, but maybe 10 years ago when your girlfriend dropped you, you were like, oh, why? It's terrible. Why me? And then you're like, well, I'm pretty happy it happened, right?
Totally, right? Yeah, you never know like what kind of other potentially better opportunities are going to open up from something that, in the moment you're going to perceive as something terrible.
Do you know Jocko Willink?
Yep.
Yeah, he's a former Navy SEAL and pretty big on the, say, motivational scene. And he has this saying, it's like whatever you present to him as a piece of information, he'd say good. Like, oh, there's been an ambush, good. And I find it's a good, sometimes when you have a system like this, and saying good, to rewire yourself, it can be quite powerful. So that's a bit what it makes me think of.
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, it's all about frames, right? Two people can look at the same event and one person thinks it's terrible, and like a great example I heard the other day was two people get into a fender bender, a car crash, and one person gets out of their car and they're like, why me? This is so annoying, like, freaking you idiot, watch where the frick you're going. And then the other person gets out of their car and they're like, whoa, we had this car accident and no one got hurt. That's amazing. Like, thank you. I'm so grateful that no one got hurt and we can just walk away from this.
Gratitude, I'm sure you do gratitude often.
Yeah, I have a gratitude practice as part of my morning routine, just going through my affirmations and just thinking questions like what am I grateful for and everything. Yeah,
that's a very, very powerful tool. Completely encourage people to do it. And like navigating those ups and downs, they're going to be part of the entrepreneur's journey, especially. Of course, of everyone's lives, but I feel like as an entrepreneur, if you want to be successful, that consistency is important, and seeing when it's not going as well and being like, well, I know that's the moment when I'm gonna make a difference, the days that count, right?
Yeah,
Is that
absolutely.
something that helped you a lot, thinking this way for consistency and build a successful business?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to keep the mental headspace positive, like that. And I put in between 2 and 3 hours every single day into doing that with various things, whether that's the gym or mental exercises or affirmations and stuff like that. So I think that's so important to being effective in your business.
I think that's a lot of value and practices for the listener. You can do kegels, you can do a lot of gratitude, meditation, bulletproof coffee if you find stimulant would work for you, and yeah, a lot of great tools also to automate the business. So thank you so much for dropping so much value, Danny. It's
Heck yeah, man.
really appreciate it. How can people follow you to have even more of those nice little gems?
Best place would be dannycarlson.co, DANNY Carlson, CARLSON.co, or reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, danny.k.carlson. Always happy to answer DMs on there. And if you guys come out to Bali, then let's come have a coconut and talk about freedom, make it happen.
Go do some ecstatic dance and have a cacao.
Yes.
Thank you. I have a tradition. I finish with a big warm hug. Thank you so much, Danny.
Thanks, buddy.
And thank you to the people who took the time to listen to this value.